Okay, thank you very much. We are back now. We just had to take a quick moment's recess, a few minutes recess in order to reset the stream to YouTube, and that's because the YouTube stream only is able to be done in chunks of 3-hour intervals. So we will continue this hearing. Again, this is an oversight hearing on the Guam Power Authority. Just to recap briefly where we were last left off at, we were talking about net metering and the Guam Power Authority's current petition before the PUC to lower the rate of compensation for the net metering program. That is to lower the amount that they will pay net metering homeowners for the solar energy that they are feeding back into the system. So where we last left off was a discussion about the value of solar, right? So currently GPA is looking to lower its credits to net metering customers from the full retail rate of 26 cents per kilowatt hour down to 15 cents per kilowatt hour, which is about the LEAC rate. So when we last left off, I was mentioning a value of solar study that was conducted by Clean Power Research LLC that says that solar should be worth anywhere from 21 cents per kilowatt hour to 28 cents per kilowatt hour, depending on the scenario. And Chairman Duenas, you were citing some reasons why you don't agree with that value of solar study, correct?
That's correct, because I would say that when they produce power, the benefit to the system is we don't have to produce that kilowatt. So I don't have a problem with that. But they don't pay for the transmission and the distribution, most importantly, the distribution system. Outside of their house is a transformer, wires, poles, and there's a substation somewhere there. So all of those costs benefit them. If they disconnected from the system, I wouldn't have a problem, because then they can keep all the power that they produce. But they don't. They produce power, and then they give it to us, and then they take it back. So I'm willing to give them a credit for the power they produce up to the 15 cents. That replaces what we need to burn, a little bit of the generation cost. Those things, I think, is an acceptable thing. But they still use the grid. And there has to be a charge for using the grid. And it's not the GPA is the one getting shortchanged. It's the other customers of GPA that are getting shortchanged. Because if we don't recover the cost for the grid, then we have to increase their costs. The non-NEM people have to pay more. There's no magic money pot for GPA. And remember, these are all based on what is called cost of service. What does it cost to provide the service? Based on transmission costs, administrative costs, distribution costs, generation costs. So wherever they provide the powers in the generation and the oil part, and that's not a problem. But they have to pay for the other parts of the system that they do use. If you're not going to do that, then you're going to require that the non-net metering customer pay more for his power. Because that difference that the general manager was showing you, that is currently around $3.5 million or $4 million a year, that has to be made up by somebody. So that cost now has to be made up by somebody. It's going to be all the other customers of GPA.
Sure, I understand that that's the argument you guys are presenting before the PUC. But again, I'm having a hard time agreeing with that.
Okay. Yeah,
we can disagree. Because of the, like I was saying, so for a net metering customer, they are being credited, right? So they're being credited at a rate that's correct. Offsetting what they would normally be billed had they not fed back into the system.
No, right now, they are being given a one-to-one credit. That was set by the PUC with no study of what the costs were.
Correct. One-to-one what?
It was a one-to-one credit, no study at all. And the PUC said after
you mean one kilowatt hour to one kilowatt hour?
No, $1 to $1. So whatever in other words, they said you will only pay the customer service charge of $15. You will not pay for anything else as an incentive. And the PUC said after
if a net metering customer doesn't produce enough solar energy back into the grid, are they billed anything? For example, if a net meter, say it's cloudy for one whole month, and that net metering customer is not feeding very much solar energy back into the grid, you're saying they're still only charged $15?
For most of them, they will pay a bill. But
Correct,
here's
because they're
wait,
still
let me-
being
let me-
billed.
well,
Their bill
let
is
me- let
being
me-
offset by how much power they're feeding back into the grid at a one-to-one ratio. That's what the one-to-one is,
The
correct?
one-to-one credit, yes. But the one-to-one credit is something that the PUC set up without any study. They just said, we're going to do this because everybody else was doing it. Now everybody else is looking at it
Sure.
again.
Speaking of study, there is, are you aware of the Daymark Energy Advisor's recommendation to the PUC? Their recommendation was to, quote, continue to support the legislature's policy-based decision to encourage the growth of renewables at the customer level and to, quote, reject GPA's proposal. Do you agree with that assessment?
No, I disagree with that, and I believe management disagrees with that also. And that's where it's going to be really up to the PUC.
Daymark also
Mr.
cites that, quote, most of the states in the U.S. are still crediting customers at or near the full retail rate.
Yes, and that's at or near. It doesn't mean that they continue to solely do it at that rate. They are beginning to back off.
The trend has been to get away from net metering, Senator. In addition, back to the Daymark report, they really didn't address the core of our petition, and our petition is the cost. So if you look at that report, nowhere did they talk about the cost. They talk about many customers are still like this. They talk about delayed until the next rate case and all of that, but not one point in that report addressed whether our costs and our numbers or anything are really flawed, or in fact not are in fact wrong, and make a recommendation on that. So really, we had that report, but they really didn't bring any substance to help address that issue. No. One question back. Here's our cost. When you were talking about the that research companies study. If you look here, there's a debt service cost of 3.5 cents. 3.5 cents is what everyone is paying to pay off the debts that we have. Net metering customers don't even pay that. But
Again,
yet the customers,
Because
then
they
let
are
me,
being
but
billed, and you just admitted that if
no,
they
no,
don't
Senator,
produce enough
wait.
solar energy, they do get a bill.
They're
And
not
the bill
billed,
is
they're
at the
getting
rate that
cre-
includes everything you have there.
Yeah,
It's
they're
at a
getting-
rate that includes everything. It's
they're
at the
getting
rate that everyone else
they're getting
pays.
credit on kilowatt hours. They're getting credit on kilowatt hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the year, it's true. If they use a little less, then they pay that for that little that they didn't produce. If they produce more, we still pay them. We pay them at the 25 cents, which is what I was showing earlier. So if they, for example, if a system produces 15,000 kilowatt hours per year and they only use 12, the 3,000 kilowatt hours we buy back from them at 25 cents, but yet to produce that same amount of energy, 3,000 kilowatt hours, it only costs us $480 versus the $746. So not only did we lose out by them not paying anything for the system, we also have to pay them more for just generating without any value.
Now, if a net metering customer produces, we've already established that if a net metering customer doesn't produce enough solar energy to offset their power bill, they do get a power bill, depending on how much they produce.
Yes.
Now, if a net metering customer produces more than what they are using from the system, from your oil generation, are they credited that as well? So in
No.
other words, do you pay them for any
No.
solar they put into the system over what they use?
It's almost like the LEAC. They credited over and under recovery GPA does not make any money out of that. So let's go back to renewables, to the solar PV.
Well, just
Eh, eh,
answer
but-
that. That's
no,
a
sorry,
yes
if I
or
may,
no. Do
but
they?
just finish this one. If they generate, they usually have a credit ahead of time. So that particular month that you're saying that they didn't generate enough, then they use their credit. They still didn't get, for that period of month that they didn't generate enough to cover their needs, is because of the credit before that they used to offset it. They still don't pay anything to GPA. So when
so
you
you're
come
saying
to
the
the whole
credits
year,
roll over to the next
Yeah.
month?
they keep rolling over unless at the end of the year you decide that you have to decide as a customer whether you want us to pay you for all that overage. Otherwise, that credit rolls over from month to month to month. So if you have a big bank of credits already because you overproduce, you don't pay anything except your $15. It's not like that's why if we had a buy low, sell low, then that will start to address maybe some of the things that you're talking about. When you buy power from us, you pay just like everybody else. And then you have separate meter for what you sell to us. And then either you, on the one-to-one credit now, they get the full 25%, 25 cents. But what we're saying, and maybe it's down the road, we can agree to a certain number, whether it's 17 or 16 cents, then that's what we will pay you back. That way you're not mixing the two together, see? So that's what I'm hoping something will come out of this petition to begin to address that, and to begin to we're asking for a phase-out approach. We're asking for a 5-year phase-out approach, so that they can at least pay the base rate, and we will give them benefit for line losses, any other variable costs that we are offsetting, and all those different things. But right now they have credits. It just keeps on passing.
How will that affect customers that signed into a net metering program at the current rate?
In the future, we're also asking the PUC that beyond the existing customers, they get paid at the new rate, the avoided cost rate. Otherwise, we're still compounding the problem. Why is that a big concern? Okay, the big concern is that the non-net metering customers are going to be paying for this. Secondly, take it from a manager's concern. Here it is. I have a budget revenue coming in every year and expenditures. So when it comes in, there's one component, one variable that I am not in control of or aware of or don't know what it may be, and that component is the $3.5 million that is going out every year for solar and net metering. That's coming out of the base rate, the revenues that we receive for running the system. If you continue to do that, 2,000 customers is $3.5 million. You add another 1,000 customers over the next month. So what does that? Where does that go? That goes to 4.5, almost 5 million. So now I have to take another $1.5 million from the main budget. Keep on doing that scenario. So when does it impact the customers? When we go down the line and we need to file a rate case because we cannot meet obligations. Then the rates are going to go up for everybody else because all of these non-paid expenditures are there to be in. So that's the key here. That's the concern as to why we're bringing it up, to make sure that there's parity in the system.
But that power they are feeding back into the system, you guys can turn around and sell to other customers.
But again, the other part of this is that they're even generating power. They're generating power in the daytime. Okay?
So if you lower their rate for crediting, then you should lower other customers' rate because you're paying a lower rate from the net metering customer.
I won't mix the two yet, Senator, if I may. Go back to the daytime production. If you want to go apple to apple, right? Daytime production, that's the cheapest time of the day to generate power for GPA. Because we have base load capacity, the load is not that high. in the evening, and that rate could be like 12 or 13 cents a kilowatt hour.
So do you charge
In the
customers a lower
evening-
rate for daytime
No,
power?
no. In the evening, when we use the peakers, that goes up to 17 to 19. So here they are, they're putting in this rate where they're selling us power when we don't need it really, and then it's costing us more in the evening for more fuel. See? So that's an additional impact to non-net metering customers with this type of scenario, see? So it's really it's a triple whammy, if you will.
So you said daytime power production is cheaper.
That's right, because the base loads are running, and then as you go higher and higher, then you have to run peakers to generate the energy. That's why we try to reduce
But you
the
don't
peak.
charge customers a different rate for daytime versus nighttime.
No.
That's called time of use rates, and we don't do that.
Yeah.
And we don't do that because the peak for Guam is in the evening, when people leave their work and go home and start to do laundry, start to cook, start to do all the other things that they do. And so therefore, that's the highest cost of the day in terms of the power, because John has to turn on more of these other units. When you do that, what happens is, if we went to time of use rates, that's done in other jurisdictions where they're trying to encourage people to change their patterns and say, don't do your laundry at night. Do it in the middle of the night. Okay? That would be very difficult for our population. So we have resisted the urge to go to time of use rates. Time of use rates works well if people can control their time and they can schedule their work and schedule all the other things they do. I guess, Senator, I think we probably are not doing a good enough job of trying to explain this to you, and I don't know if we can, but the way this is resolved is really the PUC is the one who has the ultimate decision. And so we've put forth a case, and we tried to explain the case to you, that we put forth to the PUC. And it's up now to the PUC to decide what to do. They're the ones who have to evaluate. They're the ones who are given that Daymark study. They have to read it. It's not for us to come up and say, PUC, don't do this, do this. We have given them what we believe to be...
Well, it is. You're the petitioning entity.
Yes, and so we've done the petition based on our data. And we're not doing a good enough job of helping you understand why we've taken the position we've taken. But what I'm trying to tell you is the way this is structured, having once upon a time being on the PUC, is we then give them our petition, and that's their job. Their job is to evaluate our petition, and they set the rates. We don't set the rates. We petition. They set the rates. So
Correct.
therefore, Senator, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's really up to the PUC, and we're going to wait for their decision. That's all we can do. Unless I guess what I'm trying to say is, unless you're trying to tell us to change our position, and that's what we can't do, because based on our knowledge, that position that we're taking is correct. Then the PUC is the
I'm
one.
trying to understand the logic behind the petition.
Okay, and we're not doing a very good job.
I think you've done a good job of explaining it. I just disagree with the logic.
And you know what, Mr. Chairman, we can appreciate that. We can agree to disagree. We don't, and I guess that's why I'm trying to say the final arbiter in this is really the PUC.
And are you aware also the Daymark report says, quote, distributed solar is a good resource for the island that adds to its resource diversity and has the potential to provide distribution locational benefits. Discouraging it is not ideal, end quote. That's just part of the Daymark study.
Our answer to that is that in Guam, we designed the system really quite reliability. It's smaller. So every circuit basically, except for one that I know, has the backfeeding capability. So therefore, if something happened at the end of this customer's line, we can feed from the other end. Distributed solar, as they will know it, is really, for example, in San Diego, you have this one city way up in the mountain and all of that. So they're saying instead of transmitting all that power, and then when that transmission line goes out, they're without power, then distributed generation has locational value. It doesn't have locational value for Guam, no? Because the way of our system is set up, because we've had to set it up to make sure that it's reliable for everyone. So I disagree with that statement. The one value that it does, which we agree and we have stated already, is that because they're generating power there and distributing it right to that area, you get a credit for line losses, because then you don't have to distribute the power such a long way and lose energy. So there is that saving to the system. And that saving is about 5.5%. No? So when you take the total fuel cost like the LEAC divided by 0.95, that's the number that they could get, which we agree with. No? But as far as whether it has a physical help or assistance, maybe one out of the 52,000 customers, it's not significant, not at all. No?
Senator Perez, do you have any questions? I'm sorry, I forgot to recognize Senator Sabina Perez has joined us. Forgive me, I was caught up in the line of questioning. I forgot to recognize your presence.
I guess, so as chairperson of the Committee on the Environment, my concern is greenhouse gas emissions and basically compliance with Clean Air Act. And I understand that one of the big reasons for the new power plant is to address, it's part of the state implementation plan, is to address the non-attainment for Cabras and PD. So my concern or my interest is, looking forward, looking ahead, when they do possibly, impose requirements regarding nitrous oxide as well as greenhouse gases and other criteria, contaminants or pollutants. And, I would like, I guess, as part of the environment, I think it's important to increase, obviously, there's a law, bill that was introduced to increase the renewable portfolio by 50%. And so, I guess to tag along to what you were saying about distributed generation, the positive of that is you reduce the amount of line loss, if you have to transmit the energy over long distances. So I would like to see a coexistence occur. I mean, I know, 100% renewable, that'd be a great thing for Guam, and it'd be great to work towards that. I understand the drawbacks of having solar because it only happens during the daytime, but I know there's more advances coming online as far as a smart grid is concerned, where the batteries are becoming more advanced, where we can store that energy on the battery pack, and potentially some other renewable energy besides solar that can subsidize that loss at night. So I guess I'm interested to hear about the flexibility of the grid as it occurs on Guam, and what is the, I know there's some financial things that we have to consider for GPA. I'm just interested to see what is the maximum that we can achieve as far as distributed solar power generation pertaining to the grid.
Yeah, I'd like to give you the big overview first. We are very supportive of going to 50% renewable. We believe we can achieve that. We believe 2035 is a good target because that gives us the time to make all the other component changes to the transmission and distribution system to get there. We also believe that by 2035, something else may come along, and we'll be able to get better at it. In all of our knowledge and all of our research and going out to look at different areas, the best places that have a chance at getting 100% renewable right now are states like Washington State that have huge hydroelectric power. And therefore, that is a renewable energy. But most states don't have that ability. The mainland is looking at a big grid system where when you're producing solar in this area, it's still nighttime on the West Coast. And as the sun moves across, it continues to put solar into the system. And you're going to be moving, shifting back and forth, because then you can run power plants here, shut down power plants here. Guam, as a small little island, doesn't really benefit from those things. The best place maybe to indicate that you will be able to use distributed, what is it called? I'm sorry. I'm losing my train of thought. Would be really the southern end of the island. In other words, when you have to push power down to the southern end of the island, where you have very low load factors, then it might be makes more sense to say, well, if you put some sort of renewable energy in that area, but then again, you have the problem of if it produces too much power, where does that power go? So Guam as a whole is a very small grid, and those things don't really benefit us yet. But by 2035, who knows? There's going to be something else that will come along that will benefit us. And all I'm saying is we are working on our plan, and our plan is going down the road, and the 180 megawatt plant that we're putting up north is going to give us the ability to work with the renewables that go up and down, and to do all the other things that allow us to put more renewable in the system. But really looking beyond that, I'm going to tell you, I don't know anybody who can tell me with certainty where they're going to go. I've asked the small grid system in Kauai, for example. We visited that place, and I went. They have a little bit of hydropower there in Kauai. But I asked them, I said, you guys are mandated to go to 100% renewable. I said, what does that mean to you? You know what their answer to me was? We don't know. I said, what do you mean? He said, we don't know if they're asking us to do 100% of our current generation in renewable, have that amount available in renewable. We don't know if they're saying we must produce 100% of our peak load in renewable power. We don't know if that means you have to produce 100% of your average load in renewable power. Nowhere. Believe me, you can look at all the statutes. You can look at Hawaii, which I like because they're small islands. Nowhere do they identify what they mean by 100% renewable. There is nowhere that I've ever read where they say 100% renewable means this. And so we believe that where we're headed to is going to benefit the island. It's clean. It's also going to cut our cost. It's going to help our ratepayers. And we will still have the reliability of the power plants that we need to have. And they'll work well with renewable energy that we have today.
I'm sorry, thank you, Mr. If we look at say that just the next 10 years, so how renewables and everything will place in our generation capacity. The contracts that we have in place and working to have in place, including this 40 megawatts on Navy leased land, is saying that 26% of our energy by 2021 will come from renewables. So you add the 20 megawatts out there of the net metering, you're talking about 200 megawatts. The new power plant will be coming on the line around 2022. In the meantime, again, that new power plant is definitely needed. Otherwise, we can't add any more renewables to the system. The units cannot take it. The type of units cannot take the renewable intermittency. So therefore, when the new power plant comes on the line, we can add another 200 megawatts with some upgrades in the transmission system, because we got to transmit this energy from all different directions with a redundancy, so that if one line fails, the system continues to operate. So therefore, you can get towards the 50% by the goal of the 2035, if not earlier. Of course, we're going to try to over-promise and under-deliver. So, but we need a new power plant. We need some transmission upgrades, different things, and we can achieve towards the 50% renewables. So that's yeah. But right now, the most that we can put into the system will be what's being planned right now until that new power plant comes on the line. See? And that will give you 50%. Beyond that, you continue to, again, you take the next step. There might be other opportunities. The taboo work, waste to energy, gives you 3% of your energy. No? Other type of renewables that come up. And again, every time we go out for a bid for renewables, you didn't say solar PV or wind energy, or it's open to anything. And I mentioned earlier, we had one bidder the previous time bid on geothermal, and that came in at 24 cents a kilowatt hour versus the 8.5 on solar PV. So again, every time we go out and bid for renewables, all different renewable systems are welcome to come to the table and then bid a price on it. And then that will continue to add to our renewable portfolio. So the next 5 years, we'll reach the 26%, or 3 to 5 years. Then beyond that, we can add another similar amount of energy, and that will give us 50%.
So is it accurate to say that with more solar panels, you would have to increase the amount that GPA is producing to offset the fluctuation? Is it a 1-to-1 ratio, or what's the ratio?
The new power plant would actually help to reduce the intermittency because it reacts faster. Today, the machines can react fast enough so that when the solar PV goes down, the machine has to catch that in tenths of a second, or actually even less than that. So the battery system we're putting in Hagania and Talapo, 40 megawatts, the new power plant, and then additional batteries that are coming in with the solar PVs, because all solar PV system, henceforward, has to have batteries in it, so that to prevent this additional decaying of the system. So all of that now will begin to stabilize the system and provide quality power. But the way it is now, if we don't put in that new, they call it flexible generation, that would allow you to react quickly, allow you to turn it on and shut it down, because when renewables start generating power, there's nothing left for these machines to carry. Therefore, you have to shut it down. And that's what the new power plant is going to do. It's going to be able to do that. Turn on, turn off, ramp up quickly, ramp down quickly. So then that will now make us really open up to more and more renewables. And more importantly, a more reliable and improved quality in the type of service that we provide.
Now you're requiring with distributed generation that they have a means to offset the fluctuations. So that would mean there was less need to have this flexible requirement.
That's right. That's a scenario that needs further discussion. One is, there's a movement to go ahead and keep on putting batteries and solar PVs, the net metering and all of that. They really need to evaluate the cost of that. My evaluation of it really says it's better for the utility to put in a battery system, and because of economies of scale, and they just pay their share of that system, than having all these individual batteries, because a battery pack could be as much as $6,000 to $10,000 for the amount of energy that it carry, and that amount of energy, one battery pack won't serve you for the whole day. I've analyzed how many battery packs you need for an average home. You're going to need 3 or 4 modules. And when you take that and you evaluate the amount of energy they use and the battery life of 10 years, because typically they'll last 10 years as well, it comes up to almost 25 cents a kilowatt hour just for the battery. So I'm saying the battery that GPA is putting in today, 40 megawatts, for everybody to pay for it, it actually averages out to 0.2 cents a kilowatt hour. So if customers just pay for the grid cost, then really there's no, unless they just prefer that they have their battery, they want to get away from GPA and all of that. But in terms of economics, be careful, make sure you analyze the economics of that battery system before you make that commitment or long-term commitment to purchase it or so and so. Unless, again, it's just a preference. No? So that's all I'm saying. That's the numbers that I've worked out. No? What is
We have
so
folks
where
here
did
from
it
the
go?
industry. Would you guys,
Huh?
would you like to comment? Did you want to make any comments regarding that?
Sure, yeah, I'd like to invite up Mr. Volcolo. Please turn on the microphone and introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I didn't expect to come here and speak today. We just came in here to listen.
We just see you sitting here, so we figured.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity. One thing that I can say is in GPA's plan, as you can see, there's nothing in there about private industry. Nothing about distributed generation in that plan. Thank you. Which I feel pretty disheartening with that. A lot of comments that were made by GPA we feel aren't true. Even 2 years ago, when we met with GPA numerous times at plenty of public hearings, we told them, look, batteries are coming. When we did the value of solar study, we said that we don't disagree with you. We don't add capacity to your grid. Right now, in the last 2 years, batteries have came down 40%. Efficiencies have gone up 60%. That was in a 2-year time period. What's going to be going on in 5 years, 10 years? So you have a public utility that's a monopoly on the island. In 10 years, do I feel that private industry is going to be able to sell energy cheaper than the utility? 150%. So the 25-cent comment that was just made, we can deliver 2 batteries to a household, get a normal household through the night, sun comes up in the morning, recharges those batteries. That's at 21 cents. But our industry's growing. It's getting legs. We're moving very quickly. Technology's moving extremely fast now. So to build a 180 megawatt power plant with an industry that is growing so quickly, technology is just, every year is just manifesting and just becoming more and more efficient, less expensive. I think, we're on a pathway that we shouldn't be going down right now. I got to meet a gentleman that was the grandfather of solar energy in West Germany. His name was Hermann Scheer. I met him 20 years ago. He said 20 years ago, in 2 decades, if anybody is investing in fossil fuel power plants, you're going to be sitting on stranded assets. And and I can tell you seriously, with being in this industry as long as I have, these power plants are going to be a stranded asset. Distributed generation through the island is the way to go. It spreads that power out. They have minimal baseload generation. Of course, I think we need that. Distributed generation, we need it. I've never seen such a hard campaign that's going on right now with the utility against the private industry. The numbers that they're given, $3 million, we've debated those numbers. We don't believe in cost shifting anyway. It's a myth. Berkeley's laboratories put a report out. They proved that it's a myth. But even if you take the numbers that they stand on, it's not even $3.5 million. It's actually $2.5 million, which we don't even believe that that's factual. So, and that's data that is third-party, neutral data. I mean, and that's what we go by. We did a value of solar study. Value of solar study stated that in distributed generation, this is what you have if we don't add capacity with batteries. This is what our energy is worth if we do add capacity. Right now, the solar systems that we're installing with battery storage. So I appreciate the opportunity, but distributed generation, it helps the island. Distributed generation is needed with the island. If you had solar farms, if you take a look at a case study with Puerto Rico, solar farms did not fare well there at all. And Puerto Rico's a lot bigger than Guam, a lot bigger than the CNMI. Distributed generation in Puerto Rico did extremely well. We just rode out Typhoon U2. At that time, we had 418 systems installed. 80% of our systems, no problem at all. 20% we had back online in 3.5 weeks. We were there waiting for the utility to hook up their power. Right now, we're installing the Tesla batteries in Saipan. So next typhoon that comes through, these customers will be able to have power go right in through the typhoon and then after the typhoon. So distributed generation on the islands, small islands like Guam, CNMI, makes perfect sense.
Just to be
Thank
clear, for the audience that's listening, when we're talking about distributed generation, distributed solar specifically, that's referring to rooftop solar. Correct?
That is correct.
So what you're talking about with regards to the percentage of loss you had in Saipan, what was it again? Basically, you said you're saying your rooftop solar fared well in Saipan after U2?
It did. We had 418 systems when Typhoon U2 went through. And as everybody knows, that was gusts up to 230 miles an hour. Approximately 82 of our systems were damaged. We had 2 systems that were completely wiped out. The rest of the systems were, a couple panels here, a couple panels there. And that was 20% of 80%, so about 82 systems. So, but if you had a solar farm there, it would have been totally destroyed. So a solar farm on an island in Typhoon Alley, does that really make sense? Does it add energy security? Does it add resiliency to the grid? I honestly don't believe that.
You believe distributed solar generation is more reliable?
For sure. Especially being out here in the Pacific.
Senator Perez, any questions?
Yeah, I would like to further explore this topic with the parties here today. If there's a way we can implement more renewable energy, less greenhouse gas emissions. I don't know if this is something that we can work at this time. I would like to further explore this, basically.
Sure, thank you. This is actually, so your line of questioning has actually led already into the next issue on the agenda, which is the renewables portfolio update, which you sort of began discussing already. You mentioned that you believe you'll be at 25% of the portfolio will be renewables by what date again was it?
2021.
And then you believe that it's doable to get to 50% by
The 2035 date is a reasonable date.
So my question is, what is the percentage that you think is the maximum percentage that this system can get to with renewables?
I think, again, we like to take it a step at a time. And because it's not just, it may seem like when I talk about distributed generation, I was talking about NEM type. But when we're looking in the heading 25 to 50 and beyond, there are some parts that the distributed generate or smaller rooftop solars, or they will have a part, but the economies of scale right now really are on the larger utility scale and all of that.
There's some other
again,
models. Oh, go ahead. I'll let you continue.
So again, you're saying from a scale basis, no? to get to 100% on solar PV, you're talking about almost 4,000 acres of either raw land, combination of rooftops, and all of that, no? So
What if every rooftop was covered in solar?
I think I estimated every rooftop will give us maybe 20, 30 megawatts, no? Okay. So you need the raw land and all of this, and then again, even not only the big parcels, but the small parcels. So again, it's going to start coming from economies of scale that we're running all of big land to bring the costs down. And maybe it's going to incrementally increase then because of the, you know. But again, that's the process that we're going to. We're putting it in so much at a time. And again, costs are coming down, technologies are improving, and we're catching it that way. So again, that's why we, you know, a target of, we had the target 25% by 2035. We're achieving it early. The target, let's just change that 2035 date to 50%, and we're going to do our best to achieve it. I have myself a date, but again, you know, it's my date if in my mind that I don't have the, what do you call it? But all I can say is it is, I believe it's achievable by before 2035, no?
Okay. So again, what percentage, though, do you think is the maximum percentage of renewables that
I don't have
the
that.
system could reach?
I don't have that in my mind.
So if you believe 50% is doable by 2035?
Correct.
So, you know, I'm wondering, because I've heard you make the statement before that, and I believe Chairman Duenas, you've made this similar statements that baseload generation is still required. You're going to need some form of baseload generation from a plant that burns oil, basically. That's correct? Is that correct?
Yeah. My recommendation is that you always have a backup plan, backup conventional generation. And that's why we believe this will probably be the last conventional plant that we build. Because remember, there's a big paradigm shift from the way we generated before to what we're generating now. We need plants that can work with renewables. So hence the 180 megawatts, no? Plus we do have combustion turbines and other that are around this. So that will provide the backbone for the system. Because again, the storm comes in, you got to have that hard, you know, you got to keep the water wells running. You got to have that hard. You can't just go on solar. So again, everything else will be more beyond that. Will be how, you know, what is available in renewables at what cost, and how do we get there? You know, it can be done. I just don't know what that number is yet.
Okay, with that's where I was getting at. Is so, if you're saying that you're going to need some baseload generation from generators that burn fuel, you know, what is the minimum amount of generators that burn fuel that this system can run on? In other words, what's the maximum amount of renewable energy that the system, you believe, can achieve? You know, is it 75%, 80%, 90% renewables? You say 100% is not feasible, so I'm wondering, what is feasible?
I don't have that before me right now. I know it could be more than 50%. How much more?
But it can be more than 50.
That's right. But
Senator,
I don't know. But again, maybe we need to categorize this, whether you can probably run renewables like some people do, where you run renewables for a day and you serve everything, all that energy for a day. But can you is that 100% renewable going to be there for every day or every kind of day or every kind of weather or condition in the future? No? Because if you don't have it there, remember, our economy is really based on having energy. And so that's why, again, you need that conventional energy. And again, we need for sure this 180. Beyond that, you know, we need to take a look at what else is going to come in. other base loads, again, I'll go back to waste to energy. That's solid base load, 3%. So other things like that can give you base load energy. But other than the conventional burning oil, the less we have, the better it is, and we'll continue to drive that. Remember, we went from 2.7 million barrels a day, like a year, to 1.7 million barrels a day. So we continue to drive that down.
You mentioned earlier about the distributed solar, and you mentioned you thought that was mostly referencing the net metering program. But have you heard of a solar host program?
Yes, I heard about the solar host, and again, we'll take a look at all those other different programs as we move ahead. We're still studying all that. Again, to get to 50%, you look at all of this. Even us, when we go out for utility scale, do we have another 120, 150 available? Maybe that's all. So you have to fill in the gaps of all. Then you start going to the other types of things, no? Like solar hosting is basically utilizing the customer's rooftop and providing some incentive to that customer, making it, in my opinion, we need to make it a win-win-win scenario, no? And yeah, that's an opportunity that it's not out of the table. We're not saying that. We're not even saying no rooftop solars anymore. We're just saying no net metering one-to-one credit anymore. See? So we're not trying to stop solar PV or anything. Yeah.
Okay. How about some other forms of energy? Mr. Vocola, it's up to you if you'd like to sit at the table or not. I don't have any. Senator Perez, do you have any further questions for Mr.?
Well, yeah, I do have a question. So let's say we really we're successful in making Guam renewable reliant. What would be the effect of the cost of fuel? I imagine it would go up. And at what point will it be really expensive for energy here on Guam to be burning fossil fuel? Is there a point, have you guys calculated that number?
Can you repeat that question again, Senator, please?
So the concept is I want to transition Guam to becoming more renewable energy reliant, and which means we're going to have a mixture of fossil fuel, possibly, obviously fossil fuel energy production based, or fossil fuel based energy production. What would that do to the cost of fuel if you guys are importing fuel to run your power plant? I guess the question is, how do we get to that point where we can become more energy independent?
Well, the program as we have it today is by 2021 have 25% of our energy from renewables, no, solar PV. And of that part, we just contracted 120 megawatts of solar PV at 8.5 cents a kilowatt hour. 8.5 cents a kilowatt hour versus the 15 cents per kilowatt hour that we're paying on the LEAC today. So that in itself, if 2021 is like today, would be a $19 million savings. So that will start, to bring down our total fuel costs. The new power plant is going to burn less fuel. It's going to burn ultra low sulfur diesel, which is clean, and get away from the cheap fuel that we're burning today, which is dirty. So that's going to come in at a better efficiency. And so that cost will be almost what it's costing for the base loads today. So, and again, on ultra low sulfur diesel, that's the plan. The third component of the plan is to natural gas. With natural gas, an equivalent cost per barrel for natural gas to bring it in here, I estimate to be about $57, $58 a barrel. So right now, our cost for oil per barrel it's about $73. So again, natural gas can bring that down. If oil goes haywire, like was mentioned earlier in the hearing, where there's some projections you'll go to $200, $100 a barrel, then now you have three components in your system to be able to control your costs, and more importantly, to stabilize your costs into the future. Because in the renewables, our escalation cost is only 1%. So that 8.5 cents per kilowatt hour will only be about 10.5 cents in 25 years. So again, so those three components is really gonna not only is gonna reduce our total energy costs in the future, and more importantly, begin to sustain now a reasonable energy cost future, and not have to be deal with oil this way. So we go to 50%, you got the rate of 50%, and then on the bottom 50%, you now have oil or natural gas to control that as you continue to move forward to other opportunities, other things that come up.
I guess the other part of the equation is how much energy we're going to use, right? I mean, if we can conserve energy, then we could probably meet that number quicker. So as far as 50% by 2035, if we can somehow use less energy, I mean, what is the status of that? Are we increasing, and how fast are we increasing our demand?
Right now, there's been a slowdown in demand. It's starting to turn on, and part of it is weather-wise. No, all of a sudden it's getting hot the past 2 months. No, you heard in radio probably that how my bill went up. It's basically because the consumption is getting hot and all of that. The military buildup is going to bring some growth. The military need about 7 megawatts. So there's some indirect costs there. So yes, we are going to have some growth, but on the other side of the equation, we've been providing what you call DSM rebates to try to encourage. And I'm sorry, Senator, I have to commend you. You have a bill out there for trying to get the government to go to energy efficient air conditioning. You have 5,000 split airs or whatever on Guam DOE schools. Imagine if they just get energy efficiency on those units, no? Because that's your highest cost of energy for the schools, and so again, that would help reduce the demand. So by reducing the demand, we're using less oil and other things. So that I like your other bill looking at electric vehicles, because in the future, that's part of our vision is to encourage more and more electric vehicles, because it's cheaper to run electric vehicles than it is to use gasoline. It's less fluctuating, because if we can get the electricity cost to be more stable, it's not going to fluctuate much. And again, the OEM manufacturers, if you read a lot of this stuff, are big over the next 5 years. A lot of them are coming up with more and more different products of electric vehicles, which I hope will bring the cost of vehicles down. I think just like it did for solar PV, then hopefully we can encourage and get more people here to do electric vehicles, keep our energy costs down. That would make our everyone's costs here much better.
Thank you. Mr. Beneventi, on that note, you brought up electric vehicles. Are you aware of some programs that they're currently working on now, developing, that would utilize the electric vehicles as a battery source to feed back into the system?
Yep, that's correct. So that's other things that you could consider. No, because that's something you have to have already with your car. So how can we utilize it to be a win-win scenario for both parties? No. So yes.
I was just wondering if you're aware of some of that
especially
technology.
if you get them away from charging in the peak time, because our peak, that's our highest cost energy. And it just goes back to be careful on this time of day. If I may just say one thing, Because you know who pays the most for when you use time of day? Residential customers. Why? Because they're the ones that's creating the peak. So that we just have to, not that I'm saying that it won't be a part of the system, but we have to see when it may be the right time in the system to change behavior, no?
Do you have some more questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, what's the actual number? How much do we use on Guam as far as energy is concerned? And how has it increased in, like, say, in the past 5 years or decreased?
Which one? I'm sorry, Senator.
Yeah, I just want an actual number. How much are we using in electricity, and how has it changed over the past 5 years?
There was I will provide you, but it's been very close. But in the 2013, it started to go down because the 2012, 2013, it started to go down because of the oil prices were at $110 a barrel. Then it went down to, in 2016, when oil was low, it started to turn back upwards. And then now again, it's starting to turn. So what does that say? We have a lot of elasticity here, which means people are just at the borderline and in their cost for energy. And but in terms of our total revenue, that fluctuation has not been very drastic, significant to a point where it's been almost relatively flat, flat. But we can provide you that, Senator. It's about, we use about right now about 1.6. We sell about 1.6 billion kilowatt hours. I'm sorry, a year. And we use about 2.7 million barrels of oil a year. Yeah.
If I could, thank you. So just going back and just to say how powerful distributed generation solar energy is, if you just chunked it, right, and if you just took the Department of Education, the schools that we have, we could put 20 megawatts on the 37 schools that are currently here on Guam. With that, we could save the Department of Education about $4.2 million a year annually, going back to the DOE's budget. Now, there's an opportunity cost, right? What the utility is saying is, well, 2021, we're going to be coming online with solar energy. We could actually deploy 20 megawatts in about 8 months on the Department of Education schools. That's probably half of their shortfall on their budget going back to the schools. So, and that's just the schools. That's 20 megawatts right there. So, thank you.
That's appropriate because schools operate during the daytime, and you wouldn't see necessarily the fluctuation at night. So yeah, it's appropriate, I think.
Yeah, that's correct. And now if you add the Tesla power packs with the schools strategically placed, now you have shelters that will never be without power. So it's another consideration.
Also, then those batteries would feed back into the system and could feed in during peak when the schools aren't in
And help the
operation.
utility out. Absolutely correct. Thank you.
So, Senator Pears, if you have any more questions, otherwise I'd like to move on to still with the renewables side, but we've been talking about solar, but I wanted to talk about something else, particularly wind turbines. So, what happened with the wind turbine contract with Pacific Green Resources in Narahan? Why did that contract fall through?
They did not deliver.
Was there any indication as to why they didn't deliver, or?
I know we had a performance bond. We took the performance, so eventually went back, but they didn't deliver.
Any
I don't know
any
why
plans to go to the next? Were they the only bidder?
They were the only bidder on wind. I just know. Let me go off to the side of this. we do have one wind big, small big 275 kilowatt wind turbine that we put up at Windward Hills.
Right. I was going to ask a question about
Yeah.
that as well.
And that was a $2 million project for
Funded by
275 kilowatt.
Correct?
So there, if it was just us investing that money, I would not have gone with it. But of course, we got a grant to do that, so now it's free, and that energy is free to the system. No, so I'm not sure whether the economics didn't work out or what. But again, I can't speculate. All I know is that we contracted and we support it to get it done, and they just didn't get it done.
So since they didn't fulfill their contract, are there any plans to rebid it out?
No. Any renewable bid, like for example, the next one after this, say we do put out phase 4, anyone can bid on it.
Oh, it's open to any type of renewable, not
That's right.
specific to a specific type of renewable.
That's correct.
I see.
Any
Okay.
type, whether was mentioned earlier about wave power, they can all bid.
Also, has GPA repaid the $1.24 million security deposit for Pacific Green Resources?
That's correct. There was arbitration.
So you guys did pay that back already.
Correct.
Now back to that wind turbine that's along Cross Island Road. So that was a $2 million DOI grant, correct?
Correct.
That funded that. But I believe the purpose of that was ultimately to provide data about the viability of larger wind projects on Guam. What data has that provided so far?
We have the 24/7 data. So again, it's available when we go out for bid. People will ask for information. We will provide that information so that they can make their decision. Yeah.
None of that.
You want the data?
Well, my question is, my understanding is it's a grant so that GPA could gather data and then see if it's viable or not, right, to do a wind farm.
Right.
So that's why my question is, what has GPA determined as a result of that project?
We can say wind is viable to Guam, but unless the commercial entity or the private entity come in and give a competitive bid or what on it, then it's really what do you call it? The information is there, and that information is something that we're going to give out to bidders if they're interested to research and provide, so that there is some indications now that some people may be interested in providing wind again. So in the next bid, we're going to provide this information to them, because that's what you use it for, to determine whether you can generate enough energy to make the project worthwhile.
Right.
So I don't have that summary in my head, but I can get a summary.
But has GPA done any sort of analysis of the data coming through that wind turbine to see, any sort of study or analysis to see if wind is viable?
I believe our team has. I have to check. No?
Okay.
Our sport team.
If you do have a
Yeah.
study or analysis of that, I would be interested in seeing
Sure.
that, if you could
We'll
provide
get
me.
it to you.
Thank you. All right. I'd like to move on now to the next item on the agenda, which is future capital improvement projects and plans of the Power Authority, as well as bond borrowing. So my first question is, what are some of GPA's major future capital improvement projects on the horizon?
The major one, of course, is the new power plant. The other ones that we're working on now, we're working on the next 5 to 10 year one, more specifically next 5 one. It's all the different transmission upgrades and that are necessary for adding more renewables and to strengthening the grid and all that. So that we're preparing now. But again, we're funding all the other CIP needs today from just our cash flow from the debt service coverage. So, and that's up to $25 million a year that we're constantly putting into the system. But for the bigger amounts, the 115 kV line, which may be $10, $15 million, other stuff, we're putting that all together now to see what is our next plan of action on that. The other capital project that we're doing right now, really still again funded from internally generated cash, is we're changing out all the street lights on the island to LED. We're receiving almost 4,000 units at the end of this month, and we're going to change that out. And then we have a bid out for another 8,000 units. So I think within the next 12 months to 18 months, the whole island will be under LED, which has a savings that will translate to the government of Guam, to DPW, who is our customer, in the neighborhood that could fund maybe another 2,000 to 3,000 lights at the same cost today. So we're moving forward with that project. And so again, those are the major, CIPs. Mainly, first, we need to see what the new plan will cost us before we can afford to do much more. And the only critical ones that I'm seeing right now to add more savings is the ones that we have to do for renewables.
So what I'm wondering is, are you looking at any future bond borrowing that will be required for any capital improvement projects in the near future?
I don't know today into after. I think by another 2 or 3 months, I will know that answer.
In another 2-3 months, you said?
Yeah. I will know, because then we will be planning to. Of course, I have to get my approvals, but then we will be planning towards that if they agree to it, and of course we have to come to the legislature for bond repayment.
Why is that 2 to 3 months? Is that because you'll know more about the power plant? Is that why?
Yep.
Okay.
Everything else, it all kind of drives us now, because it's a major cost that's going to be there, so we have to manage our rates, what rates we can.
Right now, we can move on to do you have any questions with this topic? Go ahead. Okay. So now the last item on the agenda is power generation for the military buildup. You guys touched on it a little bit earlier, but I want to go over that a little bit more. In essence, my main question here is, or my first question is, how much more power will GPA need to produce for the military buildup?
The estimated is 7 megawatts.
7 megawatts?
Yeah. Our peak demand last year was 254. So.
And does GPA currently have the capacity to meet those needs, or is that's going to be covered by the new power plant?
It's going to be covered, yes, because most of that load is going to come in after the 2021-2022. So yes, it'll be covered by the new power plant. When the new power plant comes on, we have quite a bit of capacity available, and then from there we'll be looking at potentially retiring some of the other units that are, very costly to operate. So yes, the other thing on the build-up is the infrastructure is already under construction for the underground transmission line between Harmon all the way up to Anderson, and that's a $17 million project. They're also working on the Pinigazan substation. That's a $6 million project. So the $23 million project is being funded by the military, and the system will be turned over for operation and maintenance by GPA.
Sorry, what was that project again, the one you just mentioned?
Underground project from Harmon all the way up to Anderson, and the substation to feed the Marine base.
Okay. Now, can you explain, you kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, DOD as a customer of GPA. What is their agreement with GPA, basically? How are they billed? How is DOD billed? I understand you mentioned earlier that in their billing, they don't pay LEAC. They actually pay monthly, whatever the oil rate is monthly. Can you explain overall how they are billed?
Yeah, the Navy is a transmission level customer. So we bring the power to their substation, and then they distribute it within their base. So therefore, There is a rate for transmission level because it avoids losses on this side, no? There's less losses coming through the transmission. So that's their rate. And then the LEAG really is, they have the total fuel cost. How much is their share based on their use, and how much is the civilian's share? Their share, they pay every month, which is a benefit to us because then it avoids us, because they're such a big customer, it doesn't impact our cash flow as much. So that's a good deal, no? But they basically pay their share of the system based on what the total cost of the system and the amount of the energy that they buy from the system. So that's basically, and it's a 10-year contract, renewable every 10 years.
If they paid the LEAC rate, would that enable for the rate to be lowered?
No, they pay their LEAG just like everybody else. And again, the other thing about the Navy is that everyone has a right to petition to the PUC or participate in any rate setting. The Navy, in past rates, have participated to make sure that their costs, they pay their costs and not more or what from there. So it's all done through the Public Utility Commission, and again, they pay their share of the system.
I think, though, your question, Senator, was would it be beneficial if they paid a LEAC rate? No. It's beneficial the way they're doing it because that part of the fuel bill gets paid. There's no subsidy. There's no waiting and seeing whether you're under-recovered or over-recovered. We fully recover on them. So they're 20% of the bill, so they're 20% of the fuel. They pay. So it benefits what we're doing now is the beneficial way to do it. And the customer-supplier agreement is based on a cost that was arrived at, based on a cost of service again. And so they pay their fair share. The military is a good customer. They 20% of our revenue base.
Why do you think they opted out of the LEAC then?
No, it's not a question of they opted out. I think that's the way we negotiate it. Because we wanted to negotiate and get the money from them and not say,
Okay.
We'll give you 6 months and maybe at the end of 6 months, wait, you're short.
I misunderstood. I thought earlier in the discussion, I thought you had mentioned that it was something they opted out of, but you're saying no, it was part of the negotiations.
It's a
with them.
negotiation
Okay.
thing. So that's why they have a contract. It's called a customer service agreement because they're unique. So in that is all negotiated.
Okay.
Okay?
So now with the contract they have with GPA, so it sounds like, I guess in layman's terms, it sort of sounds like they're purchasing the power in bulk.
That's one way of looking at it. They're purchasing the power in bulk. But the point I'm trying to emphasize is they are paying their fair share. In other words, they don't get any breaks.
For example, by purchasing the power in bulk, then they don't impact the rest of the system for the distribution transformers and all of that. They absorb that loss on their part of the system. So whatever is the line losses on the transmission system, that's what they pay for, just like everybody else. So it's kind of divided again by the sales and by the what the user is demanding from the system.
So you basically determine how much power you feed to them on like a single meter basically, and how much power you're sending to that one transmission station?
That's correct. We have 19 meters on the island, throughout the island, and that's their metering point.
So they basically pay off of one large meter.
Yeah, something, add it all up together.
What schedule do they pay for that 1 meter?
That's the point, Senator. They don't have a schedule. They're not part of the schedule. They just pay.
It's schedule letter N.
N for Navy.
N for Navy.
But it's
I'm just
not
kidding.
part. Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to stress in very simple terms is they pay their fair share. There's no subsidy from the civilian community to them. And they're a good payer because their money comes in, period. It's just an electronic transfer. So we have cash from them.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So thanks. So they have their own schedule that they pay at, unique to them.
They're a unique customer in the system.
Okay, all right, thanks. I don't have any further questions. If any of my colleagues have further questions, I'll go ahead and open it up to you.
Sure. Just going back to the rate for the Navy, is that, so that's based on consumption? What they pay is based on consumption? So basically you made an agreement that they'll purchase power at a certain rate?
That's
they're
correct. Consumption and the consumption, which includes also demand what they demand from the system, because the kilowatt demand determines how much they pay for generation capacity and all of that. So yes, all of that, and again, all of this went through the Public Utilities Commission. That actually was the one that set the rate for the Navy. No.
So it's not like they're agreeing to purchase 7 megawatts, and they pay that amount whether they go up or down. That doesn't exist, right?
Yeah, well, I think I need to expound a little bit. They place a demand on the system. So like large customers of ours, there's a demand meter. And so, in other words, if you have a customer and if he turns on everything, he requires this amount of power. And for example, he decides to use less. His charge is at this amount of power. That's the charge he's going to pay. Because at any time he wants that power, we have to be ready to deliver it. So they pay for everything that they want from us. There's so they pay their full share. So it's like, I don't know, I'm trying to struggle to how to explain this, but they have a certain amount of usage. Let's say they decide to shut down a base or limit the use of a base, for example. And this is just a weird example. And they stop using that power, there's a demand factor that comes into play because we have to have that power ready for them. So whatever they want, we reflect in a cost to them. And that's set by the PUC with a big cost of service study.
What they pay doesn't vary, it's the same cost?
The unit price may go up because if they all of a sudden, like for example, they bring in a military exercise and they have a lot more consumption, they pay more. But whatever it is, they pay their fair share. I'm not explaining it very well, except that this is a big study with a lot of consultants, their side, our side, and they all agree to certain cost factors and certain cost allocation. And when you put it at the end of the day, they pay their fair share and they don't get any breaks. And they want the reliable power. That's the flip side. We tell them we're going to be reliable to them. And they also try to make improvements. For example, John mentioned that underground transmission line that they're building from Harmon substation up to Anderson. They're paying for that. But they have already paid for a transmission line back maybe a decade ago from Anderson down to Harmon, to our Dedido. The facilities next to Prestige Motors. Okay, they've already paid and that's already in. So for us at GPA, one of the projects John is going to be doing is an underground line from Dedido to Harmon, from the Harmon substation to the Dedido substation. And what that means is then that whole northern end will be looped with an underground transmission line hooking up all those substations. So it's a big benefit that they've paid for on their own. They're looking for more and more reliability, which we're willing to let them do. And if they want to go ahead of us, they pay.
So like the large power customers and all of that, they have a demand charge and a energy charge. So the Navy themselves also have. So when they add more load in the future, they'll be paying more based on those different things.
I hope I answered that.
Just one more question. So the Schedule N rate, how is that rate comparable to other rates on the schedule?
There's no way to compare it because it's a whole different animal. Like we said, they're a transmission line customer. So they're not similar to anything else that we have in our system.
Yeah. Yeah,
No,
that's what I'm trying to, is it a higher rate or
That's what I'm
lower
saying.
rate
You
than
can't say it's a
commercial
higher or
than-
lower. It's their rate. You can't compare it with, say, commercial 1 and commercial 2 or commercial 3, those different levels. You can't compare it with them. It's a unique rate to them. It's
Why?
unique
Why can't you compare it?
because it doesn't factor in any transmission and any distribution facilities. It doesn't factor in a lot of different stuff. It factors what they use. They get generation, they have transmission, and then they have fuel oil. So just everything that they use is reflected to them in that rate. It's not, they can't compare to anybody else. They are unique, they're large, they're super large, and they are different from everybody else. And that's why there's a separate agreement for them. Everybody else comes in to apply power, they fill out an application, and they tell us, what their consumption is, how big is the building, all of that. We know all of that. So they put that all down, and they sign off, and they're a customer. With this one customer, it's actually a contract between them and GPA. And it's unique to them and GPA. That's why I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand why. I mean, you're explaining some of it. You said go ahead.
Because they're so unique, Mr. Chairman. They are so unique. They have more needs in terms of a demand. In other words, they need
Right.
that power when they need that power. And so therefore they pay for that. Whatever their use, whatever it costs to provide them service, they pay for.
They pay for everything except distribution costs
That's
of
behind
the
their fence.
system. That's all. Because everyone else is a customer of GPA, so they contribute to the distribution, no? So they pay transmission, generation, fuel, everything else, except for the
That's-
distribution part, which is
Behind their fence.
taking it from the substation to feed our customers individual, and those are only related to our customers. So that's
So
all.
they
It's
don't
a
pay
cost.
distribution costs.
That's
They-
because the distribution cost is behind their fence.
Yeah,
Senator.
they have
In other
their
words, their
own-
housing area
yeah.
and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
They maintain those power poles, their
Yeah.
transformers, their lines,
Right.
insulators. They pay for all of that because they do that behind their fence.
Yep, and we're hoping that one day we may be able to work
No,
something
but that's
out there. And again, we're just thinking ahead. I think there's an opportunity for both parties to save money. GPA to make some revenue, and Navy and military to save some. So
Right, if GPA were to handle their distribution. is what
that's
you mean?
right. But all we do is add a few more trucks and customers. We have all the inventory, different things like that. So there's an opportunity to increase sales revenues, which again helps everybody, no? So again,
What has
you
the
know,
Navy said about, has that been pitched to them
That's-
before?
No, well,
it's
they're-
an ongoing passing through because every so many years they have their contract, no? And so once they have a contract, that's what they do. So we have to catch it in the bidding phase. And
Because
They,
with the
they,
buildup,
they basically want to control behind their fence, Senator, and that's something we understand.
which is contrary to what they've agreed to with the one Guam approach.
Not really.
Sure, there's two different Guams. There's Guam behind the
No,
fence,
because
Guam on the
they
other side.
actually pay for it. They pay for their costs, so it's all there.
To me, a one Guam approach would mean a fully integrated utility system, which includes
and we are
GPA
open, and we are
handling
open to that with
distribution.
them. But they are the military, and they have certain security needs or whatever it is that they need, and that's all I'm saying. They're a unique customer. They control access, who is on their base or whatever. So it's not one of those things where we can say, no, we want to enter your base, we want to do this, we can't do that. That's something that's a bigger question for, the Department of Defense.
Sure.
But we've told them we can try to serve them if they want to. We're available, but they haven't indicated that they'd like to do that. And I don't consider that a non-one Guam thing because, they're a unique customer, and they have certain needs for security, for whatever. And also to control people from wandering into places where they maybe have ammunition or whatever. So that's a decision that they make, and I can understand it. But they pay their fair share. That's the main point. And in terms of one Guam, as long as they pay their fair share, I think that's the one Guam that I see. This is just me. You know, it'd be different if there were two Guams where they are being subsidized by the civilian community. Then I would say, wait a minute, that's not the one Guam. But they're not being subsidized by the military, by the civilian community. They are paying their fair share, and they have certain unique needs for the things that they do in terms of providing security for the country and the world and all these other bigger things that we don't, you know, not our, and so therefore we just, that's why I said I see it as one Guam still, because they pay everything that they should pay.
But you are open to
We're open.
exploring that
John,
option
John,
of taking
John is
over
looking for more
distribution?
business. John will always look for more business. But again, that's something that they have to be open to, because they have other considerations other than just, you know, money, or they have certain security considerations
Sure.
that I can't say to them, no, don't worry.
Sure, understood. Okay, if there are any other questions? We've exhausted everything on the agenda, so I just, with that, want to thank you for your participation in this hearing.
Thank you.
And I appreciate all the information you've provided to the committee. And with that, we will end this hearing, and thank you again for your participation. Thanks.
Thank you.